My father ripped a wrapped present out of my 7-year-old daughter's hands on Christmas morning. He looked right at her face and said, "That's for my real grandkid." Willa stumbled backward and hit the edge of the coffee table. Her little body folded and she landed on the floor with her hands out, trying to catch herself. 12 adults were sitting in that living room, 12 grown people with eyes and ears and voices. Not one of them said a word, not one of them moved. My own mother looked down at her lap like she was suddenly fascinated by the stitching on her sweater. My brother Trent glanced sideways at his wife Audra, and Audra just crossed her legs and sipped her coffee like she was watching something mildly boring on television. My daughter was on the floor. She was 7 years old, and the room decided she was invisible. I want to tell you that I screamed. I want to tell you that I grabbed my father by the collar and told him he was a monster. That would make a better story, wouldn't it? The fierce mama bear who lost control and burned the whole house down in one glorious moment of rage. But that is not what happened. What happened is that I looked at my little girl on the ground, and I looked at my father standing over her holding that stolen gift like a trophy, and something inside me went completely quiet. Not defeated quiet, not broken quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before a hurricane makes landfall. The air just stops moving. Everything goes still. And then the whole world changes. I picked Willa up off the floor. I brushed off her pajama pants. I wiped the one tear that had started to roll down her cheek, and I whispered in her ear, "You are okay, baby. Mama's right here. Mama has you." I sat her on my lap in the armchair next to the tree. She buried her face in my neck, and I could feel her heart beating fast against my chest like a little trapped bird. I held her until it slowed down. And then I looked across the room at my father. He was already handing the gift to my nephew Colton. Colton is 4. He is my brother, Trent's son, with his second wife, Audra. Colton is blonde and blue-eyed and the spitting image of my father at that age. And in my father's mind, that is the only thing that has ever mattered. Colton didn't even want the gift. He was already surrounded by a pile of torn wrapping paper and new toys. But my father put it in his lap anyway and said, "There you go, buddy. That one is yours. Everything under this tree is yours." And he said it loud enough to make sure Willa heard. That is who my father is. He does not just reject my daughter. He makes sure she knows she is being rejected. He does not just favor Colton. He turns the favoritism into a performance so that everyone in the room understands the hierarchy. And for 7 years, I sat in that room and I took it. For 7 years, I told myself that keeping the peace was the same thing as protecting my daughter. I was wrong. Keeping the peace was not protecting her. It was teaching her that she deserved to be treated this way. And on that Christmas morning, with her heart pounding against my chest and her little fingers gripping the collar of my shirt, I decided that the lesson was over. I looked at my father and I smiled, a real smile. Not forced, not fake. A real, calm, steady smile. Because for the first time in 7 years, I was not afraid of him. I was not trying to calculate how to survive the next family dinner. I was not wondering what he would cut off if I spoke up. I already knew what I was going to do. I had known for 3 weeks. Everything was already in motion. The only thing left was the delivery. "Okay, Dad," I said. My voice was warm, easy, almost cheerful. "That is fine. But before we keep going with the gifts, would you mind opening yours from me first? I put a lot of thought into it this year." He looked over at me. A little surprised, maybe. A little pleased. He thought I was doing what I always did. Folding. Smiling through it. Handing him his crown and thanking him for letting me sit in the room. He reached under the tree and picked up the box I had placed there the night before. It was wrapped in gold paper with a red bow. It was the right size for a nice bottle of whiskey or a new leather wallet, something a good daughter gives a good father. He tore the paper off in one pull. He lifted the lid. Inside the box, there was no whiskey. There was no wallet. There was a single piece of paper folded once. He picked it up. He unfolded it. And I watched his face change. I watched the color drain out of his skin like someone had pulled a plug at the base of his neck. I watched his hands start to shake. I watched his mouth open and then close and then open again with nothing coming out. 12 adults in that room, and for the first time in my entire life, my father had absolutely nothing to say. My name is Corinne Ashby. I am 38 years old. I am a veterinary clinic manager in Knoxville, Tennessee. I am a single mother. And this is the story of how I ended my father's Christmas, his reputation, and his 30-year lie with one piece of paper in a gift box. I need you to understand something about my father before I tell you the rest of this story. Boyd Ashby is not the kind of man who yells. He is not the kind of man who throws things or slams doors or makes scenes in public. That would be too easy. That would give people something to point at and say, there it is. That is the problem. My father is much smarter than that. My father is the kind of man who controls everything with silence, with distance, with the quiet withdrawal of love until you are so desperate to get it back that you will do anything he wants. He built his entire life on that power, and for a very long time, it worked. Growing up in our house in Knoxville, the rules were never spoken out loud. They did not need to be. You just understood. You kept your grades up. You went to church on Sunday. You did not embarrass the family. You did not question Boyd Ashby at his own dinner table. And most importantly, you did not make him look bad in front of other people. If you followed those rules, you got warmth. You got attention. You got that rare golden moment where he would put his hand on your shoulder and say, "That is my girl." And if you broke those rules, you got nothing. Not anger, not punishment, just nothing. A closed door, a turn back, a holiday where your name did not come up once. I spent my entire childhood performing for a man who handed out love like it was a paycheck, and he was always the one deciding who earned it. My brother Trent figured out the system early. Trent is 3 years older than me, and he learned by the time he was 10 that the fastest way to stay in my father's good graces was to become a smaller version of him. Same opinions, same jokes, same way of looking at the world. Trent played football because my father played football. Trent went into contracting because my father was a plumbing contractor. Trent even married his first wife because my father approved of her family. When that marriage fell apart, Trent found Audra within 6 months, a woman who had the exact right look, the exact right background, and the exact right willingness to smile and nod at every single thing Boyd Ashby said. My father did not just raise Trent. He built Trent, and Trent has never once seemed to mind. I was different. Not rebellious exactly, not the black sheep who set fires and ran away from home. I was just quieter about my disagreements. I went to college. I studied animal science. I got a job at a veterinary clinic and worked my way up to manager over 11 years. I did things on my own terms, at my own pace, and my father tolerated it the way you tolerate a dripping faucet. It annoyed him, but it was not loud enough to fix. Then I married Darnell. Darnell Cooper was kind, funny, hardworking, and black. And the day I brought him home to meet my parents, I watched my father perform the most polite act of cruelty I have ever seen. He shook Darnell's hand. He smiled. He offered him iced tea. And then he spent the entire dinner talking exclusively to Trent as if Darnell and I were not sitting at the table. He never raised his voice. He never said a single ugly word. He simply made Darnell invisible. That was my father's specialty. He could erase a person from a room without ever being accused of anything. He did not come to our wedding. My mother came but left before the cake was cut. She said she had a headache. I knew the real headache was sitting at home in his recliner, watching television with the volume up loud enough to pretend the whole thing was not happening. When Willa was born, my father came to the hospital exactly once. He stood at the edge of the room, looked at the bassinet for maybe 10 seconds, and said, "She looks healthy." That was it. No congratulations. No warmth. No moment of a grandfather meeting his grandchild for the first time. He looked at Willa the way you look at a package delivered to the wrong address, polite acknowledgement that it exists, and absolutely no intention of keeping it. Darnell left when Willa was 2. I do not carry bitterness about that. He had his own demons, his own struggles, and our marriage was not strong enough to survive them. But his leaving changed my situation completely. I was alone with a toddler, working full-time, barely making rent. And the only family I had within 100 miles was Boyd and Gail Ashby. So I moved closer. Not into their house, thank God, but 10 minutes away. Close enough to accept help when I needed it. And my father helped. That is the cruel trick of it. He helped just enough to keep me dependent and just little enough to remind me that I owed him. He would fix my car and then not speak to me for 2 weeks. He would drop off groceries and then make a comment at dinner about how some people cannot seem to manage on their own. Every act of generosity came with a receipt, and he always collected. But the real damage was not what he did to me. I was an adult. I could absorb it. The real damage was what he did to Willa, or more accurately, what he refused to do. Because my father did not mistreat my daughter with cruelty. He mistreated her with absence. He simply pretended she did not exist. The difference between how my father treated Willa and how he treated Colton was not subtle. It was not the kind of thing you had to squint to see or read between the lines to understand. It was loud, it was constant, and it was deliberate. When Colton was born 4 years ago, my father threw a barbecue. He invited half the neighborhood. He stood in his backyard with a cigar in one hand and a beer in the other, and announced to everyone that his grandson had arrived. His grandson. Like Willa did not exist. Like she had not been alive for 3 years already. Like the word grandson had only one meaning in his vocabulary, and it looked exactly like the blonde-haired baby Trent and Audra brought home from the hospital that September. From that day forward, Boyd Ashby became grandfather of the year, but only to one child. He built Colton a treehouse in the backyard. He took Colton fishing at the lake every other Saturday. He bought Colton a tiny set of toy tools and walked him around the yard pretending they were fixing things together. He had framed photos of Colton on the mantel, on the hallway wall, on his desk in the den. If you walked into my father's house, you would think he had one grandchild. Because that is exactly what he wanted you to think. Willa was never in a single photo. Willa was never invited on a fishing trip. Willa never got a treehouse or a toy set or a barbecue announcement. When we came for family dinners, my father would greet everyone at the door by name. He would scoop Colton up and carry him inside on his shoulders. And when Willa walked in behind me, he would look past her like she was a piece of furniture someone had left in the hallway. Not hostile, not aggressive, just absent. As if his eyes physically could not register that she was there. My mother did nothing. Gail Ashby is a woman who has made an entire life out of looking the other way. She is not cruel in the way my father is cruel. She is something worse. She is a witness who refuses to testify. She sees everything and says nothing. When Willa would sit alone in the living room during family gatherings while Colton climbed all over my father's lap, my mother would busy herself in the kitchen. When Willa would hand my father a drawing she made at school and he would set it on the counter without looking at it, my mother would change the subject to the weather. Gail Ashby has perfected the art of strategic blindness, and she has taught the rest of the family to practice it too. Trent never said a word. He knew what was happening. He is not stupid. But Trent had spent his whole life on the right side of my father's approval, and he was not about to risk that for his niece. Audra was even worse. She enjoyed it. Not in an obvious, cartoonish villain way, in a quiet, satisfied way. The way someone enjoys knowing they are winning a competition the other person did not even know they were in. She would dress Colton in matching outfits with Boyd for holiday photos. She would post pictures on social media of Grandpa and his little buddy with heart emojis. She never included Willa. Not once. Not accidentally. Not as an afterthought. The exclusion was surgical, and Willa noticed. Children always notice. People think kids are oblivious, that they are too young to understand adult dynamics and family politics. That is a lie adults tell themselves, so they do not have to feel guilty about what they let happen in front of their children. Willa understood everything. She understood it at 4 when she asked me why Grandpa never picked her up. She understood it at 5 when she stopped showing him her drawings. She understood it at 6 when she started asking if she could stay in the car when we went to his house. And she understood it 3 weeks before Christmas when she looked up at me while I was braiding her hair and asked the question that finally broke something inside me. Mama, how come Grandpa Boyd never calls me sweetheart like he calls Colton? She did not ask it with anger. She did not ask it with sadness. She asked it with genuine confusion, like she was trying to solve a math problem that did not add up, like there had to be a logical answer and she just could not find it. I held the braid in my hands and I looked at my daughter's face in the mirror. Brown skin, dark curls, her father's wide, beautiful eyes, and I realized that there was no answer I could give her that would not either be a lie or break her heart. So I said, "Some people have a harder time showing love, baby. It is not about you." She nodded. She accepted it. Because she was 7 and she still trusted me to tell her the truth. That night, after Willa fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I just sat there in the quiet and let myself feel the full weight of what I had been allowing to happen. 7 years. 7 years of watching my daughter be erased by my own father, and I had done nothing but make excuses and keep showing up. I kept dragging her to that house like a sacrificial offering, hoping that this time would be different. This time he would see her. This time he would say her name with warmth, and every single time, he did not. That night, I made a decision. I was done hoping. I was done waiting. And I was done keeping the peace in a house that was never peaceful for my daughter. I picked up my phone, and I called the one person in my family who I knew still had a conscience. I called Uncle Hank. Uncle Hank picked up on the 3rd ring. It was almost 11 at night, and I could hear the television playing low in the background. He said, "Corinne, everything all right?" And I said, "No, Uncle Hank, nothing has been all right for a long time, and I think you know that." He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned off the television and said, "Tell me what you need." Hank Ashby is 70 years old. He is my father's older brother by 3 years. He spent his whole career as an electrician, mostly residential work, honest jobs for honest pay. He never made a fortune. He never built a big house or threw barbecues for the neighborhood. He lived simply in a 2-bedroom place on the east side of Knoxville with a vegetable garden in the backyard and a truck that was older than I was. Hank was the kind of man who showed up when you needed him and never talked about it afterward. He was everything my father pretended to be and nothing my father actually was. Hank had always treated Willa like she mattered. When she was a baby, he would hold her and sing old country songs completely off-key until she laughed. He sent her birthday cards every year with a $20 bill tucked inside and a note that said something like, "For my favorite artist," because Willa loved to draw. When we came to family gatherings and my father acted like Willa was invisible, Hank was the one who would sit next to her on the couch and ask her about school. He did not make a show of it. He did not do it to prove a point. He did it because he genuinely cared about a little girl that nobody else in the room seemed to care about. But Hank had also been silent. He saw what Boyd did, and he disapproved. But he never confronted him. Not once. And I understood why. Because Boyd had something over Hank. Something Hank had carried quietly for years. Something that had eaten at him slowly the way water eats its stone. And that something was the truth about their father's estate. That night on the phone, Hank told me the full story. Their father, Earl Ashby, had passed away 12 years ago. Earl owned a piece of commercial property on the south side of Knoxville and a small plumbing business that he had built from nothing over 40 years. In his will, Earl left everything equally to his 2 sons, Boyd and Hank, 50-50, the property, the business, all of it. And he named Boyd as executor of the estate because Boyd was the one who had worked in the business and knew the operations. What Boyd did next was something Hank did not discover until years later. As executor, Boyd had full access to the estate paperwork. He told Hank that the business was in debt. He told him the property had liens on it. He told him that after settling everything, there was almost nothing left. He put documents in front of Hank and said, "Sign these so we can close this out and move on." Hank trusted his brother. He signed. He did not have a lawyer look at anything. He did not ask questions. He just believed that his own flesh and blood would not steal from him. But Boyd did steal from him. Boyd transferred the property entirely into his own name. He took sole ownership of the business. He paid off the minor debts, which were far smaller than he had claimed, and he ran the company for another 7 years before selling everything. The property and the business together sold for over $700,000. Hank's rightful share was half of that. He never saw a penny. Hank found out 2 years ago. A neighbor who worked at the county assessor's office mentioned the sale price of the property casually at a church picnic, not knowing it was supposed to be a secret. Hank went home and pulled out the documents Boyd had made him sign. He took them to a free legal clinic at the community center. The volunteer attorney looked at the paperwork for 10 minutes and told Hank that what Boyd had done likely constituted fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Hank thanked the attorney, drove home, and sat in his truck in the driveway for an hour. And then he did nothing. Because Boyd was his brother. Because he was 70 years old and tired. Because fighting felt like losing even if you won. But that night when I called him, something shifted. I told him about Willa. I told him about the question she had asked me. I told him that I was done staying silent and I needed to know if he was done too. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That little girl deserves better than what this family has given her. And honestly, Corinne, so do I." The next morning, I took a personal day from the clinic. I drove to Hank's house and we sat at his kitchen table with a pot of coffee and a folder full of old documents. Every transfer record, every signature page, every tax filing that showed Boyd's name where both names should have been. We organized everything. Then I called a probate attorney named Diane Kessler, whose office was downtown. Her receptionist said the earliest consultation was in 2 weeks. I explained the situation briefly and said we needed to move faster. She fit us in the following afternoon. Diane Kessler was sharp, direct, and exactly the kind of person you want in your corner when you are going up against a man like my father. She reviewed the documents in 30 minutes and looked up at Hank over her reading glasses and said, "Mr. Ashby, your brother committed textbook estate fraud. This is not a gray area. This is black and white." Hank nodded slowly. I could see his hands trembling on the table, not from fear. From 30 years of misplaced trust finally being validated by someone with the authority to say it out loud. Diane prepared a formal legal demand letter. It outlined every fraudulent transfer, cited the relevant statutes, demanded full restitution of Hank's share with interest, and stated that if Boyd did not comply within 30 days, a civil lawsuit would be filed and the matter would be referred to the district attorney's office for criminal review. The letter was 6 pages long. It was devastating, and I asked Diane to print one copy on her firm's official letterhead. I took that letter home. I folded it once. I placed it inside a gift box from the craft store. I wrapped the box in gold paper and tied it with a red bow. I wrote a tag in my neatest handwriting. "To Dad, with love." Then I placed it in the back of my closet and I waited for Christmas morning. I also did one more thing that week. I signed a lease on a small 2-bedroom rental across town, $1,200 a month. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I packed 2 suitcases and a box of Willa's favorite books and art supplies and put them in the trunk of my car. Willa asked me why there were bags in the car, and I told her we were donating some old things. She believed me because she was 7, and she still lived in a world where mothers did not have to plan escape routes from their own families. Everything was ready. All I needed now was for my father to be exactly who he had always been. And on Christmas morning, he did not disappoint. My father picked up the gold-wrapped box and held it with both hands. He gave it a little shake near his ear like a child trying to guess what was inside. He smiled at the room and said, "Well, at least one of my kids knows how to show some respect on Christmas." He looked directly at me when he said it, like I was supposed to be grateful that he acknowledged my existence, like wrapping a gift for him was the highest honor I could achieve. Trent laughed from the couch. Audra smiled, that polished, practiced smile of hers. My mother clasped her hands together like she was watching something precious unfold. The whole room was performing, everyone playing their role in the Boyd Ashby show. The generous patriarch, the grateful family, the perfect Christmas morning. Willa was still on my lap. Her face was pressed against my shoulder, and her fingers were curled into the fabric of my shirt. She had stopped crying, but she had not moved. She was doing what she had learned to do in that house, making herself small, taking up as little space as possible so that nobody would notice her, and nobody would take anything else from her. She was 7 years old, and she had already mastered the art of disappearing. That thought alone was enough to keep my spine straight and my voice steady for what came next. Boyd tore the wrapping paper in one clean pull. He lifted the lid off the box. He looked inside. And for a moment, his face showed genuine confusion. He reached in and pulled out the folded piece of paper. He held it up like he was not sure what he was looking at. Then he unfolded it. His eyes moved to the top of the page. I watched them track from left to right. I watched them reach the letterhead, the law firm's name, the words, "Formal demand for restitution." And I watched every ounce of color leave his face like someone had opened a valve and drained it out. His hands started shaking, not a little, visibly. The paper trembled between his fingers like it was caught in a breeze. His mouth opened slightly and then closed. He read the first paragraph, then the second. His jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscles flex beneath his skin. He flipped to the second page, then the third. By the fourth page, his breathing had changed. It was shallow and fast, and his chest was rising and falling, like he had just climbed a flight of stairs. The room noticed. How could they not? The man who controlled every moment of every family gathering was standing in the middle of his own living room, trembling over a piece of paper on Christmas morning. The performance had stopped. The mask was cracking in real time. My mother spoke first. "Boyd? What is it? What is wrong?" He did not answer her. He did not even look at her. His eyes were locked on the letter like it was a living thing that might attack him if he looked away. So I spoke instead, calmly, clearly, the way you deliver information that you have rehearsed in your head 100 times. "That is a legal demand letter, Dad. It comes from a probate attorney named Diane Kessler. She represents Uncle Hank. The letter outlines how you defrauded Hank out of his legal share of Grandpa Earl's estate when you served as executor 12 years ago. You told Hank the business was worthless. You told him the property had liens. You made him sign away his rights. Then you transferred everything into your own name, ran the business for 7 more years, and sold it all for over $700,000. Hank's half of that money was never paid. That letter demands full restitution. And if you do not comply within 30 days, a lawsuit will be filed and the matter will be referred to the district attorney for criminal review of estate fraud." The room did not breathe. I have never experienced silence like that. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a building in the half-second between the crack in the foundation and the collapse. Trent stood up from the couch. "What is she talking about, Dad?" His voice was sharp but uncertain. He looked at Boyd, then at me, then back at Boyd. My father still did not speak. His eyes were moving rapidly across the letter like he was searching for an escape hatch hidden somewhere in the legal language. Then Uncle Hank stood up. He had been sitting in the armchair by the window the entire morning, quiet, watching, the way he always did at family gatherings. But this time when he stood, the room felt it. There was a weight to it, a finality. He straightened his back and looked directly at his younger brother. "She is not making it up, Boyd. I know what you did. I have known for 2 years. I saw the tax records. I saw the transfer documents. I took them to an attorney who confirmed everything. You stole my inheritance. You stole our father's legacy from me, and you lied to my face about it for a decade." His voice did not shake. It did not rise. It was steady and measured, and that made it hit 10 times harder than if he had screamed. Boyd finally looked up from the paper. His face was a color I had never seen on him before, something between gray and white. The face of a man who has built a fortress out of lies and is watching the first wall fall. He pointed the letter at Hank and said, "You ungrateful, you put her up to this. You let my own daughter come after me on Christmas morning in my own house." Hank shook his head slowly. "No, she came to me. She told me what you did to Willa, and she asked me if I was tired of pretending too. And the answer is yes, Boyd. I am tired. I have been tired for a long time." I stood up with Willa still in my arms. I looked at my father and I said the words I had been carrying for 7 years. "You have spent Willa's entire life treating her like she is not real, like she is not yours. You ripped a present out of her hands this morning and gave it to another child right in front of her face. But here's the truth, Dad. The only thing in this family that is not real is you. Your reputation, your money, your whole generous patriarch routine. All of it was built on stealing from your own brother. You are the one who is not real." I turned toward the door. Audra muttered from the couch, barely loud enough to hear, but loud enough to mean it. "Good riddance." I did not stop walking, but Uncle Hank did. He turned to Audra and said, "You keep your mouth shut. You have been living off this man's stolen money the same as everyone else in this room, and you did not even know where it came from. At least Corinne had the courage to say something, which is more than I can say for any of you." Nobody responded. Nobody moved. I carried Willa to the front door and opened it. The cold December air hit my face, and it felt like the first clean breath I had taken in years. Willa lifted her head from my shoulder and looked at me. "Mama, are we going home?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Yeah, baby, we are going somewhere better." I put her in the car seat. I started the engine. I pulled out of my father's driveway for the last time, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. Not once. I drove straight to the new rental house that afternoon. Willa had never seen it before. When I unlocked the front door and she walked inside, she stood in the middle of the empty living room and turned in a slow circle, looking at the bare walls and the clean carpet. She looked up at me and said, "Is this ours, Mama?" I said, "Yeah, baby, this is all ours." She walked to the window and looked out at the small backyard and said, "Can I draw pictures for the walls?" I almost lost it right there. This child had just had a present ripped from her hands by her own grandfather, had been knocked to the floor in a room full of adults who did nothing, had been carried out of that house clinging to my neck, and her first thought in our new home was whether she could make it beautiful. That is, who Willa is. That is who my father never bothered to know. We slept on an air mattress that first night. I had packed blankets and pillows in one of the suitcases. Willa curled up next to me and fell asleep within 10 minutes. I lay there in the dark listening to her breathe, and I felt something I had not felt in years. It was not happiness exactly. It was lighter than that. It was the absence of dread. For the first time in 7 years, I did not have to calculate when the next family dinner was. I did not have to prepare Willa for being ignored. I did not have to rehearse excuses for my father's behavior in my head, so I could explain it to her in a way that would not break her heart. That weight was gone, and the relief of it was so enormous that I could physically feel it in my chest, like a fist unclenching. The phone calls started the next morning. Trent called first. He was furious, not at our father, at me. "You humiliated Dad on Christmas in front of the whole family. You ambushed him with a lawsuit. Do you understand what you have done?" I let him finish. Then I said, "Trent, your father stole $360,000 from Uncle Hank and spent the last 7 years treating my daughter like she does not exist. I did not humiliate him. I just stopped covering for him. There is a difference." He hung up on me. I was not surprised. My mother called that evening. She was crying. Soft, shaky crying. The kind she had perfected over decades of living with a man like Boyd. "Corinne, you did not have to do it like that. It is Christmas. You could have handled this privately." I said, "Mama, I gave him 7 Christmases to treat Willa like a human being. He chose not to, and you sat in that room every single time and watched him do it. You do not get to tell me about handling things privately. Private is where this family hides everything." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I just wanted everyone to get along." I said, "No, Mama. You wanted everyone to be quiet. Those are not the same thing." She did not call again for a long time after that. Boyd hired a lawyer within a week. He thought he could fight it. He thought the same charm and intimidation that had worked on his family for decades would work in a courtroom. It did not. Diane Kessler's firm had every document, every forged transfer, every tax filing that proved Boyd had taken sole ownership of property that was legally half Hank's. The paper trail was clean and undeniable. Boyd's own attorney reportedly advised him to settle quickly and quietly before the district attorney's office got involved. 4 months later, Boyd wrote a check to Hank for $360,000. He had to sell his fishing boat. He had to take a second mortgage on his house, and he had to do it all while the whole thing slowly became public knowledge because court filings in our county are public record. In a small town, records talk louder than gossip. Boyd's reputation did not collapse overnight. It eroded, slowly, neighbor by neighbor, friend by friend. The man who had spent decades building an image of generosity and integrity watched it dissolve like sugar in water. People stopped inviting him to things. The guys he played cards with on Thursday nights started finding reasons to cancel. The church friends who used to shake his hand every Sunday started nodding from a distance instead. Nobody confronted him. Nobody made a scene. They just did to him exactly what he had done to Willa for 7 years. They made him invisible. Uncle Hank used part of his settlement to open an education savings account for Willa. He put $30,000 in it and told me it was not a gift. He said it was a debt. He said that little girl had paid a price for this family's silence, and she deserved something to show for it. Hank started coming by the new house on weekends. He would bring donuts and sit at the kitchen table while Willa showed him her latest drawings. He helped me fix a leaky pipe under the bathroom sink. He assembled a bookshelf I had bought from a thrift store. He was quiet and steady and present, which is all a grandfather really needs to be. The first time Willa called him Grandpa Hank, we were eating grilled cheese sandwiches on a Saturday afternoon. She said it casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Grandpa Hank, can you pass the ketchup?" He reached for the bottle and handed it to her, and I saw his eyes go red and wet. He did not say anything about it. He just cleared his throat and asked her about school. But when he left that evening, he hugged me at the door and whispered, "Thank you for giving an old man something to be proud of." That next Christmas was small. Our rental house, a secondhand couch, a tree from the discount lot that leaned slightly to the left no matter how we adjusted the stand. Willa and I decorated it with paper ornaments she made herself. Uncle Hank came over, Christmas morning, with a bag of pancake mix and a stuffed animal for Willa that was almost as big as she was. He burned the first batch of pancakes, and Willa laughed so hard she fell off her chair. There were no gold-wrapped boxes. There were no performances. There was no patriarch holding court in the living room deciding who deserved love and who did not. It was just 3 people in a small, warm house who were happy to be together. And for the first time in my life, Christmas actually felt like Christmas. People ask me sometimes if I regret what I did, if I feel guilty about the way it happened, about doing it on Christmas morning in front of everyone. I used to think about that question carefully. I do not anymore. My answer is no, I do not regret it. What I regret are the years before it, the years I stayed silent, the years I kept showing up to that house and letting my daughter be erased inch by inch because I was afraid of losing a family that was never really mine to begin with. You cannot lose something you never had. My father never gave me a family, he gave me a performance. And the day I stopped clapping was the day I finally got free. If you are watching this, and you are sitting in someone else's living room, performing gratitude for people who do not see you or your children, I want you to hear me. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to stop pretending. You are allowed to wrap the truth in a gold box and set it under the tree and let it do what the truth always does. You are allowed to choose your child over someone else's approval. And I promise you, the other side of that door is not empty. It is just waiting for you to walk through it. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Hit that share button and send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in Corinne's shoes. I read every single comment, and your words mean more than you know. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and tap that bell icon so you never miss a story. We post new stories every single day, and each one is made for people like you who believe in standing up for what is right. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one.